Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are connecting from. So if you're coming to a webinar, South Africa's 2 gigawatt tender opportunity for PV plus storage, you are at the right place. So what we will do to start with is you'll see we'll play a video giving you a few instructions, and then we'll get started with the webinar as such. So. Yeah.
Welcome to this ATA Insights webinar. Thank you for your ongoing interest and support of our webinar program. Today's session will begin in 2 minutes. ATA Insights Webinars is an online platform for the dissemination of professional renewable energy knowledge across international borders. Our aim is to democratize access to information, for innovation to spread faster, and to make the industry more competitive. And we do this through our online sessions, open to all our members. Every year, we do more than 100 sessions with over 250 speakers, 50,000 attendees from more than 50 countries. To participate in the session today, use the chat on the right-hand side to introduce yourself, your company, and where you're joining from. Under the screen, you will find the Q&A box, where you can send your questions for the speakers. We will get to as many as we can today. We're recording this session, and we will send you a link to the materials in a few days. Please consider supporting our content creation for the webinar program. Contact us on the email on screen.
Right. Well, welcome to today's webinar. So if you want to know more about the 2 gigawatt tender that is happening now in South Africa, then you're at the right place. So, well, today we have 3 experts with us. So first thing I will do is get them to introduce themselves very briefly. But before I do that, I'd like to remind the audience that we have a little sort of like a custom here at ATA Insights is that we ask everyone to introduce themselves using the chat function. So yeah, so tell us where you're joining from. I am here in Madrid with my colleague Valeria, who you can't see, and I've seen that I haven't changed my name on the screen, but I am Carlos Marquez and I'll be your moderator today. But yeah, let's start the round of introductions. So uh, Chanda, would you please start and introduce yourself very briefly, please?
I will. I drew the short straw. Morning, everyone. My name is Chanda Ngumalo. I'm the managing director of a technical consultancy called Harmattan Renewables. I'm in sunny Johannesburg right now. And just a brief introduction to Harmattan. We are a renewable energy focused technical consultancy that provides services across sub-Saharan Africa from very early stage right through to asset management. And we operate in solar, wind, and energy storage space. So
right. Thank you very much, Chanda. And also get ready because you'll be the first one to present today. So have your presentation at the ready. So, Reintia, please, could you introduce yourself briefly?
Hi everyone, I'm Rensha van Tonder and I'm heading up the power sector in Standard Bank. I think many of you are familiar with Standard Bank. We're based in South Africa. I'm currently based in Centurion. We're all working from home like many of you. So yeah, we at Standard Bank are focusing mainly on Africa. We do have offices on other continents, but our main focus is on Africa and mainly sub-Saharan Africa. So looking forward to talk to you all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Reintia. And then Corentin, if you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in. So my name is Corey. I'm with Clean Horizon, and I'm the head of market analysis at Clean Horizon. We are a consultancy dedicated to energy storage for the past 11 years, and we'll discuss today what we think is the role for storage in this auction. And we look forward to discussing this with our partners Harmattan, who we decide to work with jointly on this auction.
thank you very much, Corentin, for your introduction. And well, let's get this webinar started then. So Chanda, if you could please share your screen. And in the meantime, I know that you saw it in the video, but if you I'd like to remind you that we are recording this webinar and we'll send you the recording and the presentations. So, you know, whilst Chandan and the other speakers are presenting, you can send your questions in through the Q&A box you can see at the bottom of the screen. So, right.
Are you able to see?
No, actually, well, now, yeah, now it's come up.
Perfect. Let me put slideshow. Sorry, I was failing. Okay.
Perfect.
Wonderful. So what I've tried to do is focus more on the documentation and the RFP itself, and then Corentin's going to talk more in detail about the technical side of things. So I will try and keep it fairly high level because we don't have a lot of time, but please feel free to ask questions. I've already introduced us, so I will skip quickly through us, but when you guys get the presentations, you'll have this information. So starting off, what is RMI 4P? There's various pronunciations of it. Nobody seems quite to know how to say it. But basically, this is an emergency procurement program that has been released by the Department of Minerals and Energy in South Africa. And it's designed to fill a critical power supply gap that exists in the country, essentially to reduce reliance on some of the diesel peaking plants that we have in the country, give Eskom a level of flexibility. And the goal is also for these plants to come online onto the grid as quickly as possible. So the key words that you need to understand with the program really are that it's intended to be technology agnostic. It needs to be dispatchable. And I guess that from where stems the question as to whether solar plus storage will be able to compete in this. And then it needs to be available between certain hours of the day, so 5 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. So any of your bids need to be able to comply with this. And Corentin will also go into more detail about how solar plus storage can compete in this and how it is an opportunity for you. So just a bit of background as to how this has come about. The government released a document, which is our Integrated Resources Plan, Q4 of last year, which identified this 2 gigawatt gap in short-term capacity that was required in order to prevent load shedding that has been basically a feature of our lives for the last little while, but also in light of the declining performance of some of the Eskom coal plants. So the idea is to run a program and purchase power from independent parties, and the RMI4P is a response to this. Some key information about the program in terms of timelines. You'll see as it's an emergency round, these timelines are pretty short. So the RFP documents were released in August. You have until the end of October to complete the registration on the IPP office website. And that comes with payment of a fee of around, it's 25,000 Rand. The bids are due then at the end of November. And then we should have the announcement of who the preferred bidders are by the end of this year or January next year. And following that announcement, you have about 4 months to reach financial close on the projects. So it's pretty quick, which is something that is beneficial to PV plus storage as they're quite fast to deploy. And we'll go into a bit more detail about what the other requirements are. I've put on this slide as well just some of the key terms, that it's a 20-year PPA, and there's the fuel, if you're looking at thermal fuel as a pass-through. But again, we'll talk a little bit more about this later. It's just so that you have that information on the slides. This is the information that is in the tender about the key equipment that is allowed to participate. So we're looking at a range of technologies from traditional thermal, so you'll see on there gas turbines, gas engines, through to renewables, wind, PV panels, and energy storage. And the idea again is that this is meant to be technology agnostic and is purely selection is based on your ability to provide capacity to Eskom, not on the technology that you're using. Although there are some pluses and minuses for each technology given the requirements that are in there. So there are, if any of you have downloaded the documents, quite a lot of documents that need to be read as you go through. So again, I've just tried to structure this by highlighting the specific criteria. So the bid is in two phases. You have qualification criteria, and it's a pass-fail on the qualification criteria. And if you pass that, then you go forward to the evaluation stage. So you need to be compliant with all of these that I've put there with the tick boxes. So from a legal point of view, just so that you understand the contractual framework that you're signing up to, there's an implementation agreement, which is essentially your government support. There's your power purchase agreement. You need to sign up to an independent engineer agreement, and that's a tripartite agreement with yourself and Eskom that allows them to monitor what is happening on the plant during construction and operations. The direct agreement, which again, tripartite with yourselves and the lenders as well. And then the connection agreements and the direct agreements of the connection agreements, which are either the distribution or the transmission agreements. So that's kind of the package of agreements that you would need to review and sign up to. And with the qualification criteria for this stage, you essentially need to provide a lot of information and proof of what the project is and how it's structured. So structure of the project in terms of the SPV, the members of the SPV, your equity, your debt, etc. The legal status of the project company and how it's been set up. You have to confirm and accept that the contracts that I've just mentioned up above, so the preferred bidder contracts, that you accept the undertakings that are included in those documents. And then you have to provide proof that you have contracts with your suppliers, so your construction provider, your EPC contractor, your O&M provider, should you be going down the thermal route, your fuel supply, your key equipment supply that we mentioned above with all of your key eligible key equipment, and in particular water supply rights. On top of that, you need to demonstrate provision for a decommissioning reserve. So that can be either a rehabilitation trust or a bond, a decommissioning cost bank guarantee, essentially, to show that you will decommission the plant at the end of its life. Land acquisition and land use. This is something that's quite important in South Africa. So you need to demonstrate that you've got options, lease agreements, or if there's any agreements that need to be made at a municipal or a national level for how land is used, particularly if it's on land that was previously used as agricultural land. It's important that you go through those processes and demonstrate that you've got the relevant consents. And then finally, your environmental consents. So this, you can either have your completed environmental authorization, which I think given the timelines and the allowance for different technologies, they're not necessarily, everybody will have this at this stage, or your proof of submission of the full environmental impact authorization, and then the confirmation of the relevant consents that feed into and other permits that feed into the environmental side. All of this also has to be independently reviewed by a legal expert with at least 5 years of experience. Financial, I'm not going to dwell on in too much detail. It's not necessarily our forte, but this bid is heavily a mix of commercial and technical. So you do need to understand these criteria and make sure that you have modeled the commercial side correctly in terms of the penalties that apply and how the tariff is structured. So you'll see up top, there are those 3 threshold criteria. So you've got the compliance test with the evaluation price, and you need to comply with how that needs to be structured in terms of the indices and the format of the price, essentially how you submit it. And then there's the financial standing and robustness of your proposal. So proving that you have equity, debt available and where that is going to come from. And lastly, the robustness of your financial model. So you need to provide models that are either 70% indexed or 100% indexed. It can be 2 or 1 model. Again, once this is a pass-fail, and once you qualify, then you'll be looked at based on your price, which is again split. So 95% of that is your electricity tariff, which is a combination of all of these letters, which I've tried to explain at the bottom of the slide, which is essentially your capacity payments, your energy payments, and then 5%, which is your ancillary services. So your ancillary services, that's helpful from a storage point of view, that energy storage is able to respond appropriately to this ancillary services request. I think what we'll look at, just to be clear, that in your electricity tariff, you need to demonstrate value for money for the government, which is something that's quite subjective, but you need to ensure transparent competition in your supply chain, and they will benchmark your proposals against information that they have, plus the other bidders. Included in this as well, which is beneficial for renewables, is the impact of carbon tax. So I will jump to the next slide, which is essentially looking at the carbon tax forecasts of how much carbon tax is going to be per ton of CO2. And we're starting at about €3 per ton in 2020. So it's not a huge penalty for thermal at the minute, but obviously going forward, that will have an impact. And it's important that you model that when you're looking at your bid setup. The next non-technical requirement is your economic development criteria. And this, for those of you who are outside of South Africa, any procurement, particularly that's done at a government level, needs to adhere with the BEE codes, which is to address historical imbalances in the economy. So you need to demonstrate a level of South African participation. So that is a minimum threshold of 49%, and then a minimum level of Black participation, which is 30%. You have to reach a contributor status level, which is a level 4. So there's different levels under the BEE codes. Again, all of this really, you require specific advice from experts in economic development to be able to try and meet this, because it's at a project level. And then the third threshold is compliance with the economic development scorecards that there are. So you'll see there job creation, local content. So local content, I've put a note there. The threshold is 40% local content, something that is currently slightly difficult to obtain for renewables, given that there are not so many manufacturers that are operating in South Africa. We have a couple in terms of the panels, which are Art Solar and Seraphim, but the 40% local content is something that I think is of concern to a lot of people to figure out how to meet it. But you are able to apply to the Department of Trade and Industry for an exemption. And should that be granted, it would apply to all projects and not just yours. The other things to take into account here, that ownership of the South African entity, the 49% applies to you as the seller, but you also have ownership requirements that apply to your construction and operation contractors, which is 25% needs to be South African owned, and you have some requirements in terms of the levels of management control. And all of these are subject to penalties should you fail to meet what you've promised. In terms of technical requirements, as I said, Corentin is going to go into more detail about essentially the sizing of the projects and what you need to think about, but these are the qualification requirements, so your pass-fail criteria in terms of the documentation that you need to provide. So I won't read through them all, but from the renewables point of view, the feasibility study is key, the development plan that you need to provide, what standards you're meeting, the proven design and technology requirements, that one's quite an interesting one. So particularly for storage, and again, Corentin will go into that, but you need to have 2 years worth of, or demonstrate 2 years worth of operations of a similar sized plant. For batteries, it's a 50% plant that you need to show in order to meet those criteria. And then I think some of the other interesting things, so alongside your decommissioning cost bond, you need to provide a report for how you will actually go through with the decommissioning. And key to understand is that not only do you need to provide all of these documents, but you then need to provide proof of an independent review of all of these, again, carried out by a person or entity that has at least 5 years of experience in the space and in the particular scope that they are reviewing. And then I think just as this is kind of a one before finish slide, so summary slide of some of the risks that are involved with the project, or some of the things that you need to consider having read the documents. The key ones that I'm going to focus on, I think, are you'll see the middle box at the top that all bidders, if you're looking at a thermal plant, are required to bid dual fuel machines. And DMRE can request a variation in your fuel at any point. So that's not an option, and you need to have that, and they can do that at any point in the life of your project. The one beside that on the right-hand side is that key to understand that you cannot charge your energy storage facility from the grid. That is explicitly prohibited under the documents. Some things that have changed from those of you who knew the REIPP process. For every day that your COD is delayed beyond your scheduled COD, your PPA is brought forward by 6 days rather than the 1 day that it was under the REIPP. This is up to a limit of 5 years, but it's something that you need to just take into consideration. There's also in this a minimum load commitment. So the buyer actually only guarantees to take 50% of your capacity over the life of the project. So it's key that you understand how to model that. We chatted a bit about the local content. I think the timing, depending on the technology that you're looking at, is something that it's important to understand, because you risk penalties or termination of your PPA if you fail to meet your COD obligations. And then I think one of the key risks that you need to think about is that IPP Office and DMRE are talking about releasing bid window 5 in December. So just when you will be announced as preferred bidder, and how that might impact what Eskom will take from your facility over the life of the project. If a large renewables round comes on at a lower price, how that's going to look in terms of your project risk profile. And so just to finish, this bid is not just a technical question, because technically, and as engineers will always say, there's always a way to figure out a solution to something, and you can find out the answer and you can structure something. But the important thing in this bid is to understand what is your base case as a bidder, and look at that from a commercial point of view, particularly given that 50% that Eskom will guarantee to take. What is your risk profile, and how are you going to take into account all of the penalties and liquidated damages, etc., the structure in the model. And Corentin will go into it in a bit more detail, but what's nice about the modeling that Clean Horizon uses is that it combines both your technical and your commercial side into one model, which is very important for this bid, given the way that it's structured. So that is me. Hopefully that was within my time limit.
Thank you very much, Chanda, for your presentation. If you can stop sharing your screen now, please. And I'd like to just pass on to Reintia. Reintia, you there with us?
I think it's me first with Carlos, and then Rencha on the financing. So now you've had the big introduction on the tender and what it looks like. I'll talk about a bit on sizing, and then Rencha will discuss how we finance these projects.
By all means, Corentin, please.
Sure. Okay, so let me share my screen. All right, so thanks for the good introduction, Chanda. So that's our two activities at Clean Horizon: market analysis and technical consulting. Today, we'll mostly discuss our technical consulting capabilities, because as you understand, so Harmattan has all the local knowledge of this auction, and what we do at Clean Horizon is that we use our technical models to simulate the energy storage system used in this type of tenders and understand what are the technical elements relating to the activation of storage and what are the economical results of a storage system. So how does it compete with gas or with other thermal power plants? So that's what we'll be mainly discussing today, but we also are market analysts, which means that we help our customers understand the energy storage markets worldwide. Right, this is a bit showing our references updated this August. So we have sized today approximately 1.7 gigawatt hour of storage worldwide. That's true in Europe, US, Africa, projects in Australia, and that represents more than 60 projects overall. At least half of these projects are either built or in the process of being financed. That shows that our projects are not only future hypothetical projects, but really going on the ground. So thanks to our clients who obviously carry these projects. I'll go back very briefly on in terms of the constraints of the RFP, showing here that the power plants. So there are several elements. Chanda told you that all technologies can participate, but it's very important to understand that the project can consist of several sites and several technologies. So you can have a solar power plant somewhere in the country, another solar plant somewhere else in the country, a wind power plant, a gas power plant, a storage system. All of these can be split. The project size, so the bid needs to be between 50 and 450 megawatts. So again, that's the minimum contracted capacity. Obviously, you will have to install more than 50 megawatts because that's the 50 megawatts of dispatchable power you need to have. So the green line here on this graph is if you bid 1 megawatt, well, the minimum is 50 megawatt, but that's just an illustration. If you bid 1 megawatt, you need to be able to be dispatched during a full day, so from 5 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. At your contracted capacity. So here 1 megawatt. What I'm showing here is the minimum. So what I've added on this slide is the blue curve, which is the minimum average dispatch. So watch out, you can be dispatched at 0 during a full day. This is possible. However, in average during the year, the minimum dispatch constraint of 50% Chanda mentioned means that actually during the dispatch period, in average, you should be dispatched at least 72% of your full capacity. So here, if I have a 1 megawatt project, I'll be dispatched in average at least at 720 kilowatts. Again, this is an average, so the profile could be 0 for a full day, it could be 50% for a full day, or it could be varying on a hour-per-hour basis, a lot depending on what dispatch ESCOM needs. So now looking at these constraints, what I've shown is what 1 megawatt of solar would typically produce in South Africa. So of course, you can see that there's a lot of things you can see with just drawing this solar curve. 1 megawatt solar is definitely not enough because you never match the 1 megawatt dispatch. The other thing is, so we probably need 4 or 5 times 1 megawatt of solar to have the enough energy to be dispatched during the day. That's the first easy conclusion. The second one is that you will need to charge. So if you want to have a storage system and a PV power plant providing this power, you will have to charge during the middle of the day to discharge in the evening. But you will have to keep some energy to also discharge in the morning. So you will have to largely oversize a PV plus storage system. What can be beneficial is to have several solar sites in the country, to have a different, to have a geographical diversity of sites. But what is easy to notice is that if you have wind on top of solar, you can do 2 cycles per day instead of 1 by charging once your storage system with PV during the day and discharging during the evening, then charging with wind over the night and discharging in the morning. So that's, in general, just saying solar plus storage can compete. The question, I think, is how much gas is there available in South Africa in terms of infrastructure? And of course, wind plus solar plus storage will have a reduced cost because the battery size will be lower than solar plus storage alone. Then the safety for this auction is to have a true dispatchable power plant, a conventional one probably. So gas or another conventional power plant for to make sure that even though there's no solar and no wind, you can produce at 100%. For now, it's not 100% clear whether this is absolutely required or if you can manage to have only a renewables plus storage system meeting the technical requirements. Of course, being largely oversized. Right, so the competition will be, I mean, the result to the question, which is can renewables plus storage alone compete, will also depend on the price of gas used by the government in the evaluation of the tender, the price of infrastructure, and the competition of gas. Then let me, so that's very brief insights on what we think of this tender, but now let's get to the requirements. Why does storage have a role to play? One, storage will have a role to play when there's no gas, when there's no thermal power plant, and when you will have to meet a dispatch instruction. So due to the variation of solar and wind, storage can help making sure that you meet the dispatch instruction at each time step during the day. So that's one obvious. So that you can reduce your cost of fuel, you need to have renewables during the day, and that's when storage comes into play. The next thing storage will be helpful in doing is providing the ancillary services that are required within the tender. So each day you will be dispatched for power for the next day, and you will also be dispatched for ancillary services for the next day. There's two types of reserves which are required. There's instantaneous reserves, which require 10 minutes of activation, and there's the regulating reserve, which can be maintained up to an hour. Both these services are, are very naturally good for storage. I mean, storage can deliver both these instantaneous reserve and these regulating reserve. When we're looking at reactive power, as soon as we have inverters, of course, it can be provided. So storage can also provide reactive power if needed. So I've tried there to segment the question in two. One is, can renewables plus storage compete? And then what's the role for storage? So for sure, even though renewables plus storage without conventional does not compete, I mean, does not end up having the results expected, storage has a role to play. That's what I'm getting at. Finally, let's come to what we do at Clean Horizon to help our customers on this tender. Once you have all the local contents from Harmattan, what we do is that we have a technical economical model that simulates both your criteria, how you match the technical requirements, and your costs. Chanda mentioned everything is evaluated based on a so-called evaluation price, which is a mix of your energy cost if you deliver 70% of the energy throughout the year, and your energy cost if you deliver 100% of your dispatch capability during the year. And what our code does is that we first compute all of your, we'll first take in all of your project assumptions, cost, generation profile, operational costs, capital cost, and so on. Then we run our optimization tool to minimize the evaluation price while making sure that you meet the technical requirements. And for this, we include in the computation the penalties that you're exposed to in case you do not match your dispatch instruction. Of course, if you do not match your dispatch instruction, you get some penalties, which are called reduced available output. So you get less payments, and this has an impact on your business case, obviously. So you need to make sure you find the good compromise between these penalties and having a reduced evaluation price. And so that's our techno-economical model, which does the optimization. And the result of this is of this tool is how much capacity should be deployed on each site, where to locate storage, how much storage should you put, how much cycles, how much full equivalent cycles of storage will you do, which is very important to understand the degradation of storage. Will you be doing 1 cycle per day, 2 cycles per day? That makes a big difference. And of course, we'll go as far as recommending parameters to beat, so all the tariff components Chanda recommended. Chanda asked me for all the stakeholders that are not used to storage, how has this been already done, and what's the track record for storage displacing renewables? And I found 2 examples of renewables plus storage used for more than 2 years globally. And the first one is in the French islands. Those the French islands are Guadeloupe, Martinique, Guyana, Reunion Island. And what's been in place since 2015 is that there are some regular PV plus storage auctions for storage to smooth renewable and provide power during peak time. So of course, it's not exactly the same as what we're seeing in South Africa, because here it's not 100% dispatchable, but you still need to provide a forecast of your dispatch a day ahead. So it's very interesting because it's similar. The projects are not huge. Individually, they're not huge, but overall, it results in 280 megawatt hours that will be built in the next 2 years. And the first projects in these auctions have been operated since 2018. So when you submit your bid, it could be that it's close to, it's more than 2 years than the projects have been operating. Right, so that's the first example of renewables plus storage power plants providing something close to dispatchable capacity. And the other very famous example of renewable plus storage, and this one is a large power plant, is the 100 megawatt, 130 megawatt hour power plant of Tesla in South Australia. There will be one very interesting thing in to prove it's a reliable technology. You'll have to prove that storage has been used in a similar fashion. So that's something which is always tricky because storage always does one thing, which is charge and discharge. But then this battery, this Hornsdale power plant, which was built next to a wind power plant, has an operation which is actually not related to the wind power plant. So the 100 megawatt is split into 2. There's 70 megawatt which provide FCAS. FCAS is the ancillary service name in South Africa. It's a kind of frequency regulation service, which is paid. And there's another 30 megawatt that do arbitrage on the energy markets, which means that it really charges and discharge energy blocks. And that's what you can see at the bottom of this slide. So all the small spikes here come from the frequency regulation service, and all the energy blocks which are larger come from the arbitrage services. So really buying and selling power on the grid. And this project has been operating since December 2017. So Chanda mentioned you need to show that there's a project operation for more than 2 years that is at least 50% of the size of yours. So this could mean that you can build at least 260 megawatt hours of storage within this auction. So that's it for my presentation. If you have any question, of course, you can reach out. We will have a bit of Q&A at the end of this session. But I think now what's most interesting to hear is Rentia will tell you about is would the bank be ready to finance such big storage projects?
Thank you very much, Corentin, for your presentation. And that's right, that is a big question. So, Reintia, over to you. Whilst you get ready, I'd like to remind the audience that you can send your questions through the Q&A box. I can see a few of you already have. So, but yeah, just a small reminder. Okay, well, Rentier, please.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, they normally say, you know, everybody need to listen to the lenders. But I do think, to be quite honest with you, this program is extremely exciting. I think the technical teams of various developers and supporters and LTAs are certainly having a good time in trying to find ways to optimize what's the best solution. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a sense in terms of what do we look at. I'm not necessarily going to delve into a lot of detail. I think I'll leave that to the technical teams to do. Many of you are familiar with Standard Bank. I did do a brief introduction, but just to give you a sense, we're mainly involved in Sub-Saharan Africa with quite a wide footprint, and we pride ourselves that we got local on-the-ground teams and expertise to assist, and we've developed quite a sizable portfolio on the power side, so very involved in many countries at the moment. Just to give you a very quick sense of how do we see the program, I think, you know, as Chanda alluded, you know, there's quite a number of focus points. I think, you know, the two gigs that's on the table is very exciting. I do, however, believe that, you know, that's just very small. We believe that the gap from a supply point of view in South Africa is actually quite significant. And I don't want to put numbers down, but we believe it's closer to 5 to 7 gig. So this is quite urgent. It is certainly something that we think the government should just, you know, push through and prioritize, which I think they are trying to do. We're very comfortable with the fact that we do have the government support in terms of the implementation agreement, which I think is worth noting for an audience like this, very important for a lender. Our first impressions, and I don't want to repeat what Chanda said, I think we do believe it's a costly and complex bidding process. It certainly will take a deep pocket to be able to concur and confirm bidding aligned with what the government is actually asking for. So it may end up being a costly exercise. We do believe that the project's documents, as it's shared through the RFP, is largely bankable, which I also think is important for bidders to understand. The one thing that's worth noting is the severe consequences of being late, and I think Chanda also highlighted that. It's very different from REAP, where it's one day. In this case, it's 6 days penalty on your PPA, and from a financial perspective, that can have quite a significant impact, you know, on your ability to repay lenders, for example. I'm not going to repeat the fast facts. I think many of you are quite familiar with that, the negotiability of the documents, which we're quite used to given REAP and the success and the ability to bank under that. So we largely accept that. I think the 49% local equity, I just want to highlight that. I think it's a very important consideration for any international bidder. And I would also, you know, caution anybody who want to proceed with bidding to make sure that they align with that early on, as well as the funding of any of that equity. I think the DFIs will certainly play an important role in looking at that, but given the tight timelines, I think it's something that may be a challenge. Again, I'm not going to try and be an expert, but from where we sit as a lender, I thought it may be worthwhile giving you a sense of what we see at the moment. And yes, we are quite busy. We are meeting clients, we're engaging with them, we're discussing, you know, options. And I think many of them are currently modeling what will be the best approach. So we see currently a lot of discussion around LPG to power projects. I've highlighted there, you know, mostly Saldanha as well as Richards Bay as hotspots at the moment. We've seen some in Kuga as well. The big question from where we sit is the supply of LPG, and will this not be too costly for government? Referring back to the tariff that will be bid. I think the second one that's worth highlighting is gas from an LNG perspective. A lot of questions around whether there will be LNG available at the type of scale that's required. We've seen some clients approaching us, questioning that exactly, but you know, it's also timing around bidding, which is quite soon, whether that will be ready. And then, of course, renewables plus battery storage. We've done quite a bit of work around understanding the opportunities out there, what are the options, who are the players from a technology supply point of view, who are the type of battery solution providers that do have a track record. So I can be quite frank with you, we've done quite a bit of work recently and had a session yesterday with some of the LTAs just to educate ourselves and obviously our credit colleagues, which is quite interesting. We've seen hybrid solutions, clients considering hybrid solutions. I think that probably will be, from a cost perspective, quite interesting. Again, you know, combining PV, wind, battery storage with, you know, gas to power a thermal plant at multiple sites. I think the RFP is quite flexible in terms of what can be allowed, and I think that's exactly where we're going to see quite interesting projects being banked or bid. Question from a lender's perspective is interface risk. You know, how comfortable are you around having multiple sites, multiple type of projects, thermal versus renewables? So, you know, something that's quite a steep learning curve for us, and I think it's really work in progress at the moment. So that's just from a technology point of view. I'm not going through the technical requirements. I think Chanda touched on that. I think these are the things that we highlighted. I thought I'll share some of our, you know, considerations around battery storage. And again, you know, like I said, it's absolutely work in progress. We are learning. It is a steep learning curve. We are relying a lot on, you know, our technical advisors, different players out there with some experience and views. So, you know, just some of the key things we're looking at is really who are the sponsors, who are the solution providers and the technical players. I also want to just reiterate the point around having clear alignment between sponsors and the lenders. And to that extent, you know, we see the DFIs playing a key role, especially where storage is involved. You know, I think it's fair to say that the DFI do have a bit more of an open approach towards new technologies, addressing that part of the market where the commercial banks are not necessarily that comfortable yet. And we're already having discussions with DFIs, and we're already, you know, aligning ourselves with where there may be appetite from them to partner with us if we do have some of these projects being bid. I've highlighted some of the risks that we identified, and not to go into detail with them, you know, performance guarantees, the warranty framework. We will be quite critical in terms of those technical risks and how do they line up from a risk that we will take as a lender. I think that the big issue for us is capacity degradation, and how do we address that? How do we ensure that we have O&Ms and will be able to support the replacement when that is required, you know? So again, leading back to who's the technology supplier, who's our partner, and how do we, you know, partner with the right funders to help us to navigate through this territory that's quite unfamiliar to us. So I'll pause there. I thought it's worthwhile just highlighting this as well, the letter of support, you know. So as lenders, we are required to sign a letter of support that is quite onerous. And I've always said, you know, this program is onerous on the bidders, being the sponsors, to the point that they are taking quite a bit of risk. The money they're going to spend to bid, the guarantees they have to provide, you know, and the penalties for being late. The timelines are very tight. I think closing a project in 4 months' time is going to be extremely difficult, especially if you've got a hybrid type of solution. But also the letter that's required by bidders from the lenders at bid submission, you know, require, for example, already LTA reports. You know, we had to be very clear that we've reviewed that and that we do have a red flag report that gives us sufficient comfort to be able to sign that letter. It is not that straightforward. We did highlight to the IPP office that this letter of support will be quite difficult to achieve within the limited time. And I think, you know, it may be that there may be some relaxation around that. So I thought it's just worthwhile highlighting that as well. But I think all in all, like I said earlier, it is a bankable set of documents. We are certainly looking at clients approaching us, having those type of discussions. I think there's a role for storage, and how we will participate is something that we're still unpacking whilst going through a very steep learning curve. But I do believe it's very exciting, and it would be interesting to see how many bidders and consortia will actually reach that point where they're ready to bid, because it is going to be tight. Thank you. I will pause there and hand back to Carlos. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rente, for your presentation. Very interesting points. There are a lot to digest. So we'll actually send you the slides later on. So don't worry, you don't have to memorize all of that. And we have about 10 minutes to go. We have 8 questions, and I think some very good questions here on the Q&A box. One of them is about I'll summarize because it's quite long, but essentially it's for current tenant. It says that the RFP requires EPCs that have 2 references which are at least 50% of the size of a proposed storage size, operational for at least 24 months. Do you know if there are any EPCs that actually qualify?
So that's a good question. I think indeed the requirements are quite challenging for storage. I mean, storage, there's a lot of projects currently being built that will reach, so there's some in California which are being built which are around 800 megawatt hours, and it's a very fast growing industry. But there's one key question, and I think it will be the government who will have to answer, which is, right, so I think Rantia and Chanda have managed to point out that there is some issues with gas supply. So I think there's really 2 outcomes for me out of this tender. Either there's only 1 gigawatt of gas bidding, and the rest is renewables plus storage. And of course, it will be, I mean, if there's no gas, it might be that it's oversized and that it doesn't match perfectly all the technical requirements. And the question the government will have to answer is, okay, so storage is modular, of course. So it can be argued that one 10 megawatt project and a 100 megawatt project is just 10 times a 10 megawatt project. And because it's modular and because it's just having a number of inverters and batteries behind the same system, I think the reliability that's required, it could be argued that it's just too challenging for storage for this industry, for these projects to be awarded. So I think it will depend on the government whether they want how much they can find without very big storage systems. So how much bids will there be with only small storage systems? So probably with a conventional. And for the bids which have storage, then it will be a discussion, because when they say size, they don't mention whether it's megawatt hours. Then since it's a modular system, if a 10 megawatt system is proven, then 100 megawatt is just 10 megawatt system. So I think it will remain to be discussed, but some EPCs do definitely qualify, and there is quite a bit of track record already on storage, even though for 100 megawatt hours, there's a couple in China, one in South Australia, and not so many for 2 years.
Right, thank you very much, Corentin. I don't know if anyone else would like to add to that answer?
I think maybe just apparently there's another briefing note coming out. They said today, is the rumor. And I think there have been a lot of questions posed around this, at least after the bidders conference. So we'll probably get clarifications. And I think everybody from the renewables or solar plus storage side has posed many of these questions and gone to the IPP office requesting clarifications and maybe a deeper understanding of exactly what they want and if they can be a little bit flexible, especially in light of potentially there not being sufficient gas projects. So hopefully the briefing notes will give us some clarity.
And you know, that's I think that's a very good question, actually. So one of the main question marks around, one of the things that are not clear from the documents already provided by the government.
So I think the main one is that initially there was a reliability run that was meant to go over 15 days and you had to provide 100% of the contracted capacity for that dispatchable period. So your 5 to 9:30, which is difficult for renewables plus storage to meet. But then the documents that came out after the bidders conference said that that was going to be reduced to 3 days for the same length of facility reliability run, and that they were going to scrap the project reliability run. But we haven't got then the briefing notes that actually state that. It was just in the presentations that were discussed at the bidders conference. So there's some things that are a little bit confusing in that I think IPP office are just processing them and going through with their advisors to get them into the briefing notes. But that one particularly is one that will change how you need to model your project quite significantly.
Right. Okay. And well, if you have it handy, you know, if you could actually share in the chat the link where that document will be published, you know, the answer, that would be very helpful, I think, to a lot of people. But you know, there are a number of questions, but there is one I think that fits in, you know, within this the technical requirements specified in the tender, and is I don't know whether this is the case or not, but Rodrigo Moreno says, considering that ESCOM's dispatch profiles are unknown, unless an oversight storage facility is implemented, there is an important uncertainty around the amount of non-dispatchable solar production that may be dumped. How does this affect the bankability of a hybrid gas PV solution from a lender's perspective?
I think that's a question for you, Rentia. So
what I was
to understand is that, okay, indeed, so there's only a 50% minimum offtake. So as I said, it's 50% across the year, so it's 72% during the dispatch period. But it could be that you're only dispatched this and that you have sized your power plant for 100%, because that's what's required. So I think the question for you, Rentia, but I think it will to answer the question, we'll need to have a good understanding of the tariff structure, because the tariff structure has a bit of a capacity component and an energy component. So I think it will have to be resilient to an offtake of only 50% of the energy. But I don't know what you think about it from a financing perspective, Rentia.
Yeah, thanks, Corentin. I fully agree with you, and I wanted to reference the capacity payment. So for us, it's critical to get the model right and to understand exactly how the two options or the hybrid plant will effectively complement each other. So a lot of the modeling will be based around the capacity charge and to what extent that would be able to cover the debt. So I think that's exactly probably why we've seen a lot of our clients currently going through a process to optimize their offering and haven't really decided on what approach they want to follow for those complexities around the bidding. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And well, there is another question which is about you know, being the COD very close in time, preferred bidders will very likely need to start committing equities, down payments to manufacturers before reaching financial closure. How do you see this, like in this way? Do you see this as an obstacle?
Thanks. Yeah, Carlos, I think it's not a straightforward answer to the question, and I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of the funders of the BE equity, but I do foresee this as a potential challenge. I think we've already seen clients asking us to what extent one would be able to consider equity bridge facilities. You know, what will be the collateral that will be required if one, you know, consider that. I think, you know, for some of the large players, there's certainly a possibility for them to kickstart the process with some down payments to ensure that the project make it on time. But I think your question is absolutely spot on. If you've got local equity players that are being funded, to what extent will those funders be able to take that risk? And I think that's something that probably need to be answered by those DFIs that are looking at funding them. I think from a commercial bank perspective, we've always found it extremely difficult to fund greenfields BE, just the nature of, you know, the role that we do play. But I think it's a very fair question, and certainly something that needs a bit of thinking.
Thank you very much, Brent. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that. I think we are coming to the end of a allotted time. So, Corentin, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm looking at the questions, and there are a lot. I'll just try and answer them in the chat, and otherwise we can take them by email if we're too short. But I think there are a couple regarding COD, and I mean this is one of the main constraints. Being able to get these projects online by June 2022. Storage and solar have proven they can be deployed fast. Of course, the question will be using, I mean, the key will be to use existing projects pre-developed, and that's also a challenge for another challenge for thermal, especially if it's not permitted. So that's something else that again goes in favor of renewables in this auction.
All right. Well, Chanda, do you know if you want to?
I think that there's some good questions on there about timelines and what happens, potentially leading to stranded assets, which I think are really good and pertinent questions. You know, if you're only able to, the Eskom are only going to take 50% because, and then there's cheaper, pure renewables coming on board later on. So I hope that again, in the briefing notes that this will be taken into consideration, because I think what you don't want is South Africa Inc. paying increased tariffs when they don't need to. You know, they need access to capacity, and if there's some flexibility in the requirements and they rejig them a bit, then I think the tariffs could come down pretty significantly, and you allow more people to bid, so it becomes a more competitive kind of auction process. So hopefully there are some tweaks based on all of the feedback that the various companies and sponsors and lenders have put into the IPP office.
Right. Well, I think that, you know, unfortunately, we've kind of run out of time. There are lots of very good questions there. I agree. You know, we could. There is so much to know, and so many unanswered questions. You know, around this tender. So, you know, I'd like to thank all three of you for being here today, and everyone in the audience as well for being with us. I hope that, you know, that you found this webinar helpful. Yeah, I don't know if you'd like to say any parting words to the audience. Shall we start with you, Chanda?
I think, yeah, just if you have, I see that there are a few questions still popping up. My contact details are on at the end of the presentation, so feel free to drop an email or connect on LinkedIn, and we are happy to try and answer as many questions as we can, so feel free.
Thank you, Chanda. Reintia, any parting words for the audience?
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Just from my side, yeah, I think it's important that if you want to engage early enough, and we certainly will be open to have those conversations. Thank you. Thank you,
Reintia. Corentin.
No, thank you very much for organizing this. I think you've understood that. I mean, the partnership we've made with Harmattan essentially should both help you size projects to bid competitively in this tender, and then of course we are indicated third parties to review feasibility studies. So we've created this really to be both of us a one-stop shop for this RFP. So feel free if you've got any questions we didn't have time to answer, and engage with us, and we look forward to discussing this further.
Thank you very much. Well, and see you next time here for the next webinars. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.